Oh, this is gonna be crazy. That was great. Alright, hello everyone, and welcome today to another episode of SpraynPray1000's Verdict. I am SpraynPray1000, and today I am going to be reviewing the Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD remix. I'm not exactly sure, what the ordering of it is. It might be Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 remix, or something along those lines. You gotta forgive me, but I only have the general thing. But pretty much, I think it's Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 remix. Okay, so I'm gonna go with that. And we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna discuss it because there's a lot of good stuff in this package. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD remix is a collection of older Kingdom Hearts games that have been re-released for the PlayStation 3. Kingdom Hearts, actually, let's talk about each of these games in general. Kingdom Hearts, I believe, started back in 2002, 2003. Pretty much the premise of the game was you have Final Fantasy gameplay and, some Final Fantasy characters who are new. Some who are new, like Sora, Riku, never appeared before in any video game. And others that are, older Final Fantasy characters such as Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, Aerith from Final Fantasy VII, Yuffie from 7, and then there's like Leon or Squall or whatever his name is from Final Fantasy VIII, and you got Titus and Waka from Final Fantasy X. Pretty much, it's a mix matching of the Final Fantasy genre or Final Fantasy series of games with, believe it or not, Disney characters like Mickey Mouse, Donald, Goofy. You got the various Disney movies from the 90s in here. So there's Hercules, there's the Beauty and the Beast. And as the whole franchise expanded, from the one game that they made initially, they added more Disney movies, some of which were off the charts, like I didn't expect. But for the most part, let's just stick with what's in here. Inside the HD remix, you have, as the name suggests, you have the first game in the series, Kingdom Hearts, except this is the Final Mix Edition, which is pretty much like the Ultimate Edition, if you want. It has all the bonus features and stuff, and this is actually pretty interesting and very unique because the Kingdom Hearts Final Mix has never been released outside of Japan up until this HD collection. That's right, this is exclusive. It was exclusive to Japan. All these Kingdom Hearts Final Mixes were exclusive solely to Japan. Up until, well, now they're starting to port them, you know what I mean? Now we have final mix for Kingdom Hearts 1. The second game, which is the .5, or the Interquill game, is Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, except this one is the remake. So there already was a Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories for the Game Boy Advance, and they remade it, after they made Kingdom Hearts 2, so people who played on the PS2 but didn't play on the Game Boy could play this game. And it takes place in between Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, and it's a pretty interesting game. It was actually the first Kingdom Hearts game I played, the original for the Game Boy, and it was a very interesting experience. We'll talk about that. And finally, the third game, quote unquote, is Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 Days, which was a DS game, a Nintendo DS game, released I think in 2006 or 2007 or something like that. And it basically told a side story that sort of spun off from Chain of Memories and from the original game. Runs alongside some of this stuff. So you had a side story that did a lot of this stuff. Alright, so now let's disassemble this HD collection piece by piece and actually begin to talk about these games, okay? And I will apologize ahead of time. A lot of the videos or a lot of the gameplay footage that you're going to see for this review is unfortunately only going to be from one of the stories from Chain of Memories, because I had to unfortunately get rid of most of it because it was basically taking up like 200 or 300 gigabytes just off of Kingdom Hearts, and based off of how much content there is in this game, it was just too much for me to keep on my computer so I could have a diverse review. So I apologize ahead of time. Unfortunately, you're only going to see like basically one character's, whatever. It's pretty much going to be all from one playthrough is what I'm trying to say. So let's talk about Kingdom Hearts Final Mix first, okay? And this isn't the order I played them in, this is just the order I'm talking about them in. Kingdom Hearts is basically a real-time, third-person action-adventure game. You know, unlike Final Fantasy, which is very often turn-based and stuff, you pretty much have free movement in this game, okay? Within your respective world or wherever you are. And the game works by having monsters appear. The monsters are typically called Heartless. And what the goal of the game, or well, not the goal of the game, but the goal of combat is to actually use magic, use attack. You know, you swing this weapon called the Keyblade that you have. Use magic to take out your your enemies. You can use items, and something you can do in this game is also summon. Okay, you can actually summon various Disney and Final Fantasy I don't think Final Fantasy, but you can summon various Disney characters to come aid you. And pretty much all these Disney characters have like a Final Fantasy spin on them. So for example, in the game, you pretty much can only play as Sora, who's a new character. He's never appeared before in any other game except for Kingdom Hearts. You play as him. You kind of mold him into whatever you want to be, especially at the beginning. You determine whether or not you want to be a very offensively based character, or a magic-based character, or a defensive-based character. You mold that based off of that, and they do a whole lot of questioning, or not a whole lot, but like a couple of questions that determine various stuff that I don't know what they do. I didn't figure it out. But, for example, you have Donald, okay? Donald Duck, okay? Disney character. He's been around, you know, he's a famous Disney character alongside Mickey Mouse. And pretty much what he does is he's a mage, so he knows a lot of magic. You know, his job is pretty much to, use offensive magic and some defensive magic, and, you know, kind of a mixing of the black mage and the white mage in Final Fantasy games, but not as much as a red mage. If you played Final Fantasy, you kind of get my drift. He's more of a mixing of the two. You know, he's more like a sage, in a sense. Then you have Goofy, who is more of a defensive-based character. Goofy pretty much... he has his shield. He fights with a shield, and he has all these techniques, and he can absorb attacks while he's walking with this shield, and, you know, he's very physical, and pretty much he's like a support character. He's like a paladin. He's designed to, you know, take the big blows and, you know, try and keep you and Donald from taking too much damage, to some effect. You know, other various characters, you have, for example, in a lot of worlds, you have characters such as Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas. You know, he's a magic user. He's a very strong magic user. You have Ariel from The Little Mermaid. You know, she's a little mixture of a magic user and a little bit of a melee. You know, you got various types of characters in the game that help you out, okay? You got Aladdin, for example. Aladdin is just like a complete warrior, a complete tank. He has a scimitar or something, and he can run out and start slashing. And, you know, it's pretty much, you can swap them in and out. The party system is pretty much, you can only have 2 people in your party. By default, Sora travels exclusively with Donald and Goofy. And you can swap in Disney characters depending on what world you're in. Some worlds don't have anyone you can swap in. So, for example, Wonderland from Alice in Wonderland does not have anyone you can swap in for. So you have to play with Donald and Goofy. And, you know, each character can learn their own set of abilities. So, for example, and these abilities sometimes overlap. Sometimes they're character specific. So, for example, you know, sometimes Sora might learn an ability called Sliding Dash, which lets him lock onto a target and slide towards it, and then begin to combo from that. That's exclusive to him. But other abilities such as MP Haste, which allows you to recover magic back at a faster rate than normal. That's pretty much anyone can get it. It just varies depending on their playstyle at what level they get it. Now, like usual, like every Final Fantasy game, this game makes use of an experience system. You collect enough experience points, you level up. You know, you get new abilities. You can get a health increase. You can get ability points increase, which allows you to add more abilities. So pretty much there's a lot of interesting stuff in this game that, you know, even if you've played Final Fantasy or a veteran, it's an interesting reworking of it, but on a simpler level. So for example, the spells in this game are pretty simple. You have fire, you have blizzard, you have thunder, you know, pretty much your normal elemental magic. You have cure, you have stop, you have gravity, and I'm missing one more. You have arrow, okay? And pretty much cure is for healing, arrows for less damage, is more of a defensive spell, and, you know, stuff along that. So you don't have like an entire plethora of Final Fantasy spells like you would in another Final Fantasy game. So spells like Esuna, spells like Vanish, spells like Poison, Sleep, they actually don't appear in this game. They appear later on, but they don't appear in this game. And to use magic, you just use the D-pad to select magic instead of attack from your main menu, from your combat menu. And same thing for items, you just scroll down to items. Now, items can only be set from the main menu or the start menu, and you can only open the start menu, you know, to screw around with your abilities, your key bindings, and all that stuff. You can only open that when you're out of combat. Okay, you can't open that when you're in combat. You can still pause the game, but you can't change your stuff mid-fight. Now, a lot, you know, there's synthesis. I should also say there's synthesizing items. You know, there's a lot of side quests you can do. You know, apparently in Final Mix there's also a whole bunch of elite bosses that you can fight against. There's you know, stuff that was, of course, exclusive and, you know, wasn't available in North America. Now it's available in North America. You know, there's a whole bunch of bosses. I particularly didn't fight any because apparently, you know, they have to be such a high level. And you know, I just said, you know what, I can't, with so many games coming out, there's no way I could possibly grind to such a high level in such short time on such short notice. So maybe that'd be something cool to come back to in like a year or two. But at the moment, that's not something I want to do. There's a good plethora of Disney worlds that you can visit. So, like, for example, there's Netherland. Did I just say Nether? I mean Neverland from Peter Pan. There's Olympus Coliseum from Hercules. You know, there's a lot of cool stuff. There's also some original worlds, which are, you know, more Final Fantasy based. But pretty much this game is simplified enough that, you know, if you're younger, you know, you're not particularly the kind of crowd that would play Final Fantasy, or you're just looking for a simpler experience with, you know, some comedy, some Disney elements mixed in, along with some pretty decent gameplay, then this is your game, because this game is simple, that, you know, that anyone can kind of jump into it and, you know, begin to get a feel for it and begin to, you know, play it a lot. But at the same time, it's not overly complicated like a Final Fantasy game. You know, it's not as violent. You know, a lot of times Final Fantasy games deal a lot with death and, you know, a lot with monsters and very horrible acts, you know, sometimes occur. You know, this game pretty much doesn't do that. It sugarcoats it, it softens the blow. So now, I've talked about the gameplay a bit. Well, let me just say this. What I will say is that the soundtrack in this game is really, really good. A lot of the tunes are very catchy. Even to this day, I still listen to them. The graphics, you know, they're pretty good. You got to remember that this is an HD rehandling of a game made in 2002, but it looks pretty nice in HD. I will say that. You know, a lot of games in HD, I kind of don't notice the difference as much. Even on the finished video, I don't notice it as much, you know, if I played the game before. But this, along with Wind Waker HD, I really noticed the difference. I will say that the HD, you know, I definitely, there's some points where, you know, it's kind of like, oh, I can't tell. But then there's other moments where it's just like, you know, I can really tell that the HD is strong here. So kind of rounding off Kingdom Hearts, what is the story of Kingdom Hearts, okay? Kingdom Hearts Final Mix is, you have these characters, Sora, Riku, and Kairi, who all live on this island, okay? It's called the Destiny Islands, and Riku dreams of getting off the island and exploring other worlds because he's just sick of it. He's seen everything about it. You know, and one day, unfortunately, trouble besets the island, and pretty much the island is lost, okay? These monsters called the Heartless swarm it and pretty much destroy it by consuming the heart of the world, which reduces it to nothing. And now as Sora, who gets this magical weapon called the Keyblade, he tries to track down his friend Riku, who has gone missing into the darkness, track down his friend Kairi, who has also vanished, and he teams up with Donald and Goofy. And I'm not sure if, you know, Goofy's a dog. I'm pretty sure he's like an anthropomorphic dog. He teams up with these two characters to find out, you know, what happened to Riku, what happened to Kairi, but also what happened to King Mickey. Mickey Mouse is the king, and he's just suddenly vanished. And, you know, he has this Keyblade, and he goes around sealing worlds, okay? And that's what Sora's goal is, okay? And you find out, you know, stuff like all the Disney villains are plotting together with a plot with the 7 Princesses of Heart, and all this other stuff you find out as the story progresses. You know, it gets revealed to you in various narratives. And there's a lot of stuff to do in this game. You could find the Winnie the Pooh pages, you could participate in the tournament at Olympus Coliseum. You know, there's a lot of stuff to be done. A lot of rare items to be found, a lot of exclusive monsters to defeat. So Kingdom Hearts Final Mix by itself is a really great game. Obviously, it was a great game, over 10 years ago when it was released to acclaim, so much that they decided to make a sequel. I know, back then a lot of games, you got to remember, they had cliffhanger endings because they didn't know whether or not the game was going to sell very well. But this game did sell very well. You know what I mean? So definitely justified. I thought that the ending was great, especially a lot of the pre-rendered cutscenes, not the end, not the using the cutscenes using the game's engine, but a lot of the pre-rendered cutscenes are very, very fantastic. And Square Enix always does a great job with pre-rendered cutscenes. They always have. I've always loved it. Especially Crisis Core really captured me. But just to wrap up Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, I'm just going to try and keep it moving on. Oh, is this recording? All right. Now, moving on, you have Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, which is a remake of a Game Boy Advance game that was released in 2004, 2005. I don't remember the exact year when it was released. It's a PS2 remake, okay, because all the other Kingdom Hearts games were released on PlayStation 2. They weren't released on any other console. And it's based off of the following events after Kingdom Hearts 1. It's a continuation of the story, but not necessarily Kingdom Hearts 2. And Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories introduces a whole lot of new characters, introduces a whole lot of new concepts, as they would decide to develop the story and progress it further. It introduces nobodies, Organization 13, all these various other aspects that then in Kingdom Hearts 2 would become major plot elements. But pretty much the story starts, without saying too much about the ending of Kingdom Hearts 1, the story starts with Sora, Riku, and Sora, Donald, and Goofy still traveling together, trying to find King Mickey, trying to find Riku, and they stumble upon this place called Castle Oblivion, and upon entering, their memories are altered, and basically they begin to forget a lot of the things that have happened during their adventure. This is a direct continuation, literally minutes after the end of Kingdom Hearts 1, this story begins. So it's not like it's been months or anything. And pretty much Sora is greeted by these weird people, these hooded people in black robes, and they tell him that, he has to revisit a lot of places from his memory, that his memory is being changed, a lot of stuff is going on, and, he's forgetting people, and, he might be remembering things differently, and he, pretty much for the most part, this game kind of follows the same exact form as Kingdom Hearts 1. There's a few changes, especially in the story, and especially in the combat, but I'm talking about story right now. But there's a few changes to the story. So, for example, in some areas or in some worlds that you revisit in Sora's memory, things are different. So, for example, a boss might be different, or the whole story might be different, might be scrapped and redone from scratch, literally. And so Sora progresses through the castle. He begins to forget more and more stuff and remember more and more stuff. And, there's plot twists in there. There's a lot of stuff you might not have seen coming. A lot of stuff that was unexpected. And for the most part, it's very interesting. I have to tell you, when I first played it, it was kind of a, whoa, you got Final Fantasy mixed with Disney. Because this was the first Kingdom Hearts game I ever played. I was hooked, except until one boss fight I couldn't beat. I never beat that boss. Then I came back to it a few years later. I beat it. I beat the whole game. And then I never beat the second story because there's actually a second secret story that's kind of more of a boss run. It's less story-centric. And, I just beat it, finally for the first time on PS3, part of this collection. I just beat it last night. I'll tell you, the ending was a bit disappointing. I'm being very vague right now, so you could have no clue what I'm talking about. I'm not even going to say whose story it is. I mean, unless you've watched the playthrough, in which case, obviously, you know who it is. But for the most part, now that I know the whole story, this game, I could see definitely how it leads into, other Kingdom Hearts games. How the events, really lead into other stuff. And in fact, it leads directly into Kingdom Hearts 358/2, which runs concurrently to Chain of Memories. But regardless of that fact, let's talk about Chain of Memories some more. So Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, the first major thing that you should notice about this game is the gameplay is completely different from Kingdom Hearts 1. The gameplay of Kingdom Hearts 1 is pretty much free form, free movement, free attack. You can do whatever you want at any time, in combat. You can attack whenever you want. You can cast magic. Two people can attack at the same time and parry attacks and knock each other back. Or you can dodge roll, or you can guard, and stationary guard. In Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, the whole emphasis in the game is about cards made from the character's memories. So, for example, Sora still has the Keyblade, but he can't attack unless he has a card that states this is a Keyblade attack. And unlike in the first Kingdom Hearts where you could get different Keyblades, you know, depending on what worlds you visit and what trinkets you acquire for the Keyblade to change its stats and change its form, in this game, those are revealed as cards. So, for example, a different card will have a different effect. You know, might be more powerful, might be more, you know, might be easier to recover from a crippling attack from. And one of the major things about this game is all the cards have values. So, for example, they have values from 0 to 9. Okay, and the lower the value, well, the higher the value, you know, the more powerful the card is in the fact that it can break other cards. So, for example, if one character plays a 4 and another character plays a 6, the character that plays a 6 is going to card break the person who has played the 4, thus rendering them vulnerable to attacks for a second, thus rendering them, you know, pretty much weakened for a minute. So, you know, they could get a couple of attacks in a couple seconds, they're stunned. You know, and while Sora can card break his opponents, other opponents can card break him. So it becomes more of a tactical game where you have to actually construct a deck that is, you know, able to be flexible but also can't be card broken. So, for example, there's still magic cards, there's item cards in this game which don't heal you. The only healing abilities you have are from Donald or a cure spell. You have attack cards, and then you have something called enemy cards. And enemy cards are special cards based off of the various villains from the first game and the new villains in this game. Enemy cards pretty much give you a special ability with your cards. So, for example, one enemy card might make your attacks more powerful for so many attacks, like 30 attacks that connect. Or another ability might make it impossible for an enemy to card break you while you're comboing, and stuff like that. And it's important to note that while higher level cards will break lower level cards, there is one card that can be broken by everything but can break anything, and that is the Zero card. Zero can break anything but is also broken by anything. So depending where and when Zero is played, it can be great or it can be horrible, you know, a defense opening ability. And while I do think that that's very interesting, you know, the whole idea that Zero is a very, you know, it's a random card, you know, you can play it and you can completely turn the tide of a battle. At the same time, the problem with Zero is that, let's say someone breaks, let's say you're fighting multiple enemies, or even just one enemy who's really strong. You could play, like, he could play any card, and you break it with a Zero, and then he'll just break you right back. And it's just like, well, where's the penalty, you know what I mean? Like, okay, I broke you with a Zero, I waited for you to play something stupid so I could break you with a Zero, and unfortunately the enemy just broke you right away and kept on comboing. I think that that's kind of silly at some points, that they can get away with that, and that you oftentimes can't. Now, you can construct your own deck in Sora's story using various cards you find, cards that are given to you, cards you buy from Moogle shops using Moogle points, and each deck is limited by Sora's total CP, or card points. You can only have, basically the card points is the limit as to how many cards you can have in your deck. And each card, whenever you place it in your deck, has a value ranging from like 10 to like 40. Okay, and obviously you put a whole bunch of cards together, you can't go over your CP. So it's really about trying to up your CP. Also, you need to up your HP so you have more health, so you can take more damage. There's something called slates in this game. Pretty much a slate can be a normal combo, but as you progress through the game, you can actually opt to learn more slates. And slates are basically abilities, some of them from the original Kingdom Hearts, others new, that you can use. And by basically what you... Oh, shit. This just shut off. Pretty much using a slate lets you get certain abilities in play, or lets you use a certain special move or something along those lines. And the problem with slates is the first card you use for a slate becomes unusable for the remainder of the fight. So I don't use them that often, but that's just something that you need to be aware of. So ultimately, I think that it's good. You know, there's some flaws in Chain of Memories. You know, not so much that the story is different, you know what I mean, but just sometimes the gameplay can be a bit frustrating, especially some of the bosses are really, really tough, okay, unnecessarily tough. They are not scaled at all to the rate at which you're fighting in the worlds, especially a lot of the original characters, the Final Fantasy characters, you know what I mean? You know, there's especially one fight in this game that I actually gave up on, and then 15 minutes I came back, 15 minutes later and I beat him. But at the same time, you know, it was very tough. Some of these bosses are tough. Not necessarily the same bosses from the Game Boy version, but, you know, regardless, they're still pretty difficult to beat. But ultimately, it's a pretty good presentation, you know what I mean? It still has the same high-quality Kingdom Hearts that you would expect from the first game, especially the remake. Even the Game Boy Advance version had a very high quality, I will say, because it had voice acting, full-motion video, a lot of stuff that other Game Boy games could not do, or could not afford to do, or just would not do, because it was too difficult to implement. Well, this game does it, and I think it does it very well. Now, getting on to the final part of this package, Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. This is actually a DS game, but in this version, on the PlayStation 3, it is not playable. It is not in playable form. Instead, what they've done is they've taken all the cinematics, or all the cutscenes from 358 over 2, and they've basically tied them together in a way that, there you go. Oh, my... Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm getting disappointed because my other computer is being annoying. But what Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 is they've tied together all the cutscenes and pretty much made it into a 2.5 hour movie, a little bit over 2.5 hours of cutscenes. And I watched it last night after beating Chain of Memories, and it tells the story of Roxas, okay? And this is a character who's related to Sora, you know, through various story-related plot devices or whatever you want to say. And basically, it tells his time in Organization 13. It pretty much tells his story, which actually begins, I believe, around the end, or right before the end of Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, or Kingdom Hearts 1. And then through Chain of Memories, and then beyond the end of Chain of Memories, okay? Now, the thing is, it's a pretty sad story. You know, Kingdom Hearts, I think at this point, you know, the story was getting deeper, it was getting more complicated, so it's a pretty sad story. You know, it's not necessarily a happy ending, or just happy at all at any point, and it's pretty bittersweet, but it's a good story. Ultimately, I wish, you know, they had done a little bit more with it, because it's actually a key part of the story for Chain of Memories and Kingdom Hearts 2. I wish they had done something with it, but they really didn't. They really just kind of just looped together some of the cutscenes from the DS, and then just tied them together and made it into a movie, and then that was it. You know, I mean, maybe having a remake of the game would have been nice. I mean, it doesn't hurt the value of the package, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, oh, well, 2/3 of this was great and the other third was just shitty. No, it's still good, you know what I mean? As a movie, it's good. You know, it stands alone. It was very enjoyable just to even just sit down and watch it. You know, just saying, okay, I want to learn a little bit more about the backstory. Well, there you go. You know, 2.5 hours of just watching it. And I mean, in some ways, since the DS games weren't that great for Kingdom Hearts, or weren't that well received gameplay-wise, it is a better way to have a more distilled experience with Kingdom Hearts. So I will say that. I will say, definitely, I feel that probably was the best choice. So I won't say anything too much about it. So what would I give this amazing package? Okay, 3 great games, great production value, you know what I mean? A lot of care and effort went into this. It's a very interesting mix of Western and Eastern culture, you know, with the Japanese role-playing elements from Final Fantasy mixed with Disney characters for, you know, the story and stuff, and along with some original stuff you haven't seen in a game before. What would I say about this? I think I would say that Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD Remix, or whatever it is, Kingdom Hearts HD, I don't even know how to pronounce the name. I get it wrong all the time. What I would say about it is I would say that this game deserves... Well, I almost slipped there, ladies and gentlemen. I almost made a mistake. I basically said all the things I liked about Kingdom Hearts, and did not say, you know, some of the stuff I did not like about it. So pretty much I left out all the negative points of the review, you know, not to say that I'm going to drag it down horribly, but I left out, you know, some of the stuff that makes this game, you know, kind of flawed in some aspects. First and foremost, Kingdom Hearts has extremely delayed jumping mechanics, okay? Compared to pretty much every other game, or, you know, the majority of the other games out there, Kingdom Hearts probably has one of the worst cases of delayed jumping mechanics I've seen in a long time, okay? I remember this back when I played this on the PS2, Back in 2009. I remember this, from months and months ago. You know what I mean? The problem still exists. Okay, so there are problems, with the jump response time in all the games, in Kingdom Hearts, in all of them. So, also, since I'm talking about this, I might as well go into detail about Kingdom Hearts HD. And I'm sorry because I'm recording this like a day or two after I made the verdict, so I don't exactly remember everything that was clear on my mind. What is it? Anything off the top of my head I could say? I think that a lot of the summons are pretty worthless. They don't really do much. They're not very effective or very particularly helpful. What else is there? I wish. Well, that's not that bad. So one thing that I didn't like, though, is I didn't like how the difficulty of the game pretty much spiked, like, rapidly at the end. I pretty much, once you get to the end of the game, you have to do a little bit of grinding in order to keep up. But that's not too bad, you know what I mean? If you're used to JRPG stuff, you'll be fine. It's not that big of a deal. So, well, what I really want to get into is Chain of Memories, because I can tell you a lot of stuff that I, was kind of that was distasteful from Chain of Memories. I think I already talked about one of them. I can't be sure, so I'll say it again. Whenever you card break someone, okay, and you card break someone with, say, for example, a 0 card, the enemies can just card break you right back, okay, and it just leaves you open. And, because you don't, your cards are, it's very expensive to put in cards that have good recovery times from card breaks. Enemies can really get the drop on you in a way. And completely surprise you. You could basically get caught with your pants down, okay? So I wish that was a bit different. That could change a bit. But, it is what it is. What else is there? I think that, the CP costs for some of the decks are, again, a little bit too high, for my taste. A little bit too high, in case you want to, make a deck that's somewhat well-rounded. Another thing is also that magic cards, seem kind of worthless. Pretty much they were worthless. It's the same problems that were in the GBA version kind of manifested themselves into the PS2 version, and by extension into the PS3 version, because they're really the same game, just made for both consoles. So I will say that, okay, but it's not like that's crippling. Maybe some people will find it a bit easier, to adapt to a Chain of Memories than I did. And by the way, Chain of Memories is still probably my favorite Kingdom Hearts game. Even after I played Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts, I haven't played Kingdom Hearts 2 yet. So I can't really say anything about it. Alright, well, I think that's about it. So let the verdict continue. I'm sorry for interrupting it in such a manner, but let us proceed now. And I thank you. I appreciate your patience and your understanding that I did screw up. So thank you. A 93 out of 100 because it's really well done. It's not this game, but as a collection, redone for the PS3, I think it deserves a 93 out of 100 because it's really great. Obviously, if you're a JRPG fan, and pretty much at this point, you either know what Kingdom Hearts is or you don't. If you were like me and didn't have a PlayStation 2 of which to play Kingdom Hearts 1 on, then you should definitely hop out and go buy this game. It's only $40, I believe, and then tax. So it's only $40. You get 3 great experiences, very in-depth games. Just like, look at how many parts some of these games were, okay? By comparison, Wind Waker HD was 99 parts, but that was only one game. This is a total of 2 games and then a movie, which is kind of like 2.5 games, for only $40. And ultimately, Wind Waker was $99, or not $99, 99 videos long. Kingdom Hearts 1, I believe, took me 92 or 93 videos. Chain of Memories, the first part of it took me 80 videos, and the final part I actually haven't finished rendering, so I can't, be very specific about it. But just, that's already more. So, you know what I mean? I mean, both of them are great HD experiences of older games, but at the same time, I'm just saying, just like, look at all the stuff you get. Like, this isn't a short experience, okay? And I did maybe about half of the stuff in the first game, in Kingdom Hearts Final Mix. I only did half of the stuff, maybe. I didn't do that many Coliseum challenges or all the Trinities or you know, all the Dalmatians. You can find out the 101 Dalmatians or the Winnie the Pooh pages. I didn't do all that. There's still more out there. I didn't do any of the special bosses. I didn't do any of the synthesis quests. I didn't do that. I did some, you know, that occurred to me throughout the story, but I didn't get all of it, is what I'm saying. So there's still potential for this to be even longer. Now, and especially in Chain of Memories, you know, there's some cards I never got. There's some entries I never filled in the journal. You know, there's a lot of stuff in this. And I think it really deserves a 9.3 because, you know, not only are they great games by themselves, but they're great games to remaster and play again, especially considering Kingdom Hearts 3 is on the horizon. You know, that's becoming a big thing on the PS4 and Xbox One. People can come out, you know, you want to see how this series actually began and how it started. This is a great time. Not only to mention that they were already announced that there's going to be a Kingdom Hearts 2.5 HD remix with Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep Final Mix, and Kingdom Hearts Recoded again as HD remastered cutscenes, which is kind of lame because actually that game was pretty good. But we'll discuss that when it gets here. You know, I'm SpraynPray1000. This was a great experience to play because, again, my first Kingdom Hearts playthrough was done in a very slapstick manner. It wasn't that great. So I actually really enjoyed this. This was a great game to play, and I enjoyed it from beginning to end. You know, all the games, actually. So I'm SpraynPray1000. 93 out of 100. Great job, again, Square Enix. You know, you wow me again. You know, you make great games. I'm glad to see that you're releasing a lot of these older Final Fantasies and older games for HD. You know, the Final Fantasy X and 10-2 HD remix is apparently supposed to come out sometime this year, although I have yet to find when that's coming out, so I have no clue. But, yeah, we'll see what happens with that, and I'm very proud of this collection, so we'll see you guys later.